Hello, baseball family. Matthew here again with another episode of the British Baseball Podcast. Today's guest has written a book about baseball in the UK and Ireland. He's a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Windsor in Canada. Here's Dr. Dale Jacobs. Dale, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We're here today to talk about your new book that's come out, Makeshift Fields, which is coming out this Thursday in the UK. So that will be Thursday, the 14th of May.
15th, I think.
15th of May.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this late in the future, the book will already be out now. So go forth and get yourself a copy. There will be links in the show notes of where you can order the book. So before we get into the meat of the book, Dale, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your relationship with baseball? Where did your love of the game come from, and how did it develop, and what made you want to write about it?
Yeah, I think like so many people, it came from my dad. I watched baseball growing up with him. He was a lifelong baseball fan. And I remember watching the Expos a lot. That was the team that was on TV a lot when I was a kid. And then later on, the Blue Jays were on. So watching baseball with him and talking about baseball and that led to sort of a lifelong interest in it. And then I didn't start writing about baseball until probably 15 years ago or so. And the first thing was an essay about my father and baseball. And then after he passed away in 2009, I started to think more about baseball and writing about baseball, and that led to a couple different projects. And this is the most recent, Makeshift Fields.
Mm. Yeah, I think it was in your first book you mentioned that it was when you were writing the book itself, you discovered much more about your dad and lots of those pieces. When you wrote this new book, did you find any sort of emotions coming to the surface, or was there anything that gave you those feels when traveling over here to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think this book, it started out as curiosity, like what is baseball like in Ireland and Scotland and England and Wales, and it really was curiosity. And then through talking to people and see how much baseball meant and the place it had in people's lives, it started to be something that I wanted to make sure that I told people's story the right way. And I came to have this enormous sense of responsibility to get the story right. And I think that's the connection that I made. And that happened over the course of the weeks I was in Ireland and the UK.
Yeah, I get a sense that from the book. There's some great interviews in there with the people that you've spoken to, and there's a lot of quotes in there as well, and there's a lot of stuff where I think it was when you were traveling from Aberdeen to Edinburgh, and you're talking about what made it so uniquely different, and what people going through and what baseball means to them, like like how it looks differently in Ireland, not only about how to play but how things are done. It's one of the reasons why I do the podcast and I love grassroots baseball so much. It doesn't have all the pizzazz and razzmatazz of the MLB, but it doesn't need to. It's the people that make this sport what it is in the UK, and that's what basically the podcast that I do is for. And I know what you mean about wanting to share the stories and do them right, because all the time my question, like, have I done right by the people when I'm interviewing them? And I just want to make sure that their stories are told. And it was just really good, and I read a lot of stuff, and I was like, wish I'd asked them those questions when I had
Mm.
people on. And one of the great things as well is that you might speak to bats in Leicester. And I've been
Yes.
I've failed a few times to try and get bats on the show, and it's nothing to do with bats herself. It's me, bats and beef. Um, I've just dropped the ball a few times, and reading that, I was just like, that's awesome. It's such a good thing to read through, and it's made me like want to get them on the show even more to make sure that I'd get them in there and do a full length feature on them.
Yeah, absolutely. The time with the Leicester Diamonds was was amazing to see what they're doing with that club, and how they see it as part of the community. It really was quite inspiring.
Yeah,
Um, and there's just so much energy that they have, and they're all brand new to the game. There's so many of the other teams. There were some people who were transplants from other places and had played as kids, but they all learned as adults. So they're all learning together how to play this sport that is very different than what they grew up with.
yeah. What did you have any ideas or expectations set in your mind of what you thought baseball was going to be like over here before you set off? And were you surprised or shocked when you saw what you saw?
I didn't really have any preconceptions, and I actually tried not to. I didn't know what the level of play would be like. Um, I discovered pretty quickly. The first thing I went to was a practice, or I came to see that you all call it training, which I had to get
Yeah.
used to.
Uh-huh.
I went to a training session with Dublin Mariners, Greystones Mariners, and they started going through drills, and it was all the kinds of things that I would see a team doing here. And same with games. What happens on the field looks like baseball. It's not different. Skill levels are variable, but the product on the field is the same. It's everything surrounding it and how the game comes to be played that's different. Like, so many places the people had to set up the field in full before they could do anything. I mean,
Yeah.
Edinburgh is a great example. It's in this big park, and they have to put up a backstop and put up a screen and mark the lines and do absolutely everything for several hours before they can even play. So that's different. And baseball in Scotland looks different than baseball in Ireland and different than baseball in England or in Wales. They all have their local character, but that's all about what surrounds it.
Mm.
What's on the field, it's just baseball, which I really love that element is common.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you say stuff like that because when I was playing in Manchester, we would have to get there. Like your first game would be like 12 o'clock, and you'd do a double header. Sorry, double header, 2 hour time limit on each one. But you'd be there from the field at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
And we already have a dedicated backstop on our field.
right.
But now they've got three fields, and it's putting the fences up, making sure like the dugouts are set and the warm ups and training. Before you know it, it's 12 o'clock, and it's like how's like 3 4 hours flown by
Yeah,
from when you get in there.
yeah,
And yeah, it's just like a nice little trip down memory. And I've only been in the game for a short period of time. I've been out of it like even less. And it's like a nice little diary. There's things within the book that sort of makes me remember the bits that I loved and also frustrated me. And it's yes, it's just a
sure.
nice. It's a really good read. And I think people that are involved in baseball in Britain, when they read the book, they'll just get it. I think you've captured a lot of the spirit of British baseball and its people within the book.
Well, thanks. I'm really glad to hear that.
Mm. But when a lot of people in the UK, it's something that you found out in your book as well. When I say I'm involved in British baseball, I get the response of you got baseball in Britain, and it's quite a shock. And you had similar sort of story with yours. So how did you come to find out about baseball in Ireland and Britain?
Well, so I'd previously written a book on baseball with my wife called 100 Miles of Baseball, where we went to 50 games within 100 miles of our house. So
Mm,
a mix of grassroots baseball and college baseball and pro baseball. So I knew I wanted to do another nonfiction book. I thought I was done with baseball. I really did. And so I also wanted to go back to Ireland. I teach Irish fiction. I'm interested in that. So I actually set out to Google basketball Ireland, and somehow I mistyped. I guess it's just muscle memory. I
uh,
typed baseball Ireland, and things came up, and I started to see that there was baseball there. And then I thought, well, what about in the UK? And so I started to look and to see how much baseball there was. And that kind of led to this idea, well, what if I go check it out? It seemed like if I wanted to continue writing about baseball, and this sort of led me to want to do that, this was the next logical step. And so that's how it kind of happenstance that led to it. It wasn't calculated at all. It
Yeah.
just kind of fell in my lap.
That's such a really, really sliding doors event. Like,
Yeah,
look, we sat here now talking about basketball in the
yeah.
UK, and it's good that you did find it. But I'm quite interested to know what the appeal of grassroots baseball is, because like you say in your first book, you've seen stuff from major leagues to amateur minor league games and all the bits in between. But what was the appeal of grassroots baseball for you?
I think the real appeal is people playing the game because they love it, that they're not trying to get to the next level. You know, in 100 miles of baseball, we would go to high school games, and so many of the players, they're trying to get to college, and the college players are trying to get a pro contract, and the single A players are trying to move up to double. Like almost every level, people are trying to move up, except for the we have a lot of really good amateur teams in the area I live in. In fact, a couple of them have won the Canadian Amateur Championship. Like
Yeah,
this is high quality ball. And they play it because they love it, because they're still really competitive. But that's where they play it. And so I was familiar with that idea of grassroots, but there it's also mixed with this ultra competitiveness that they want to win at all. And so seeing it in the places I visited in Ireland and Scotland and England and Wales, I started to see people want to win. They're competitive. They're playing a game, but they're doing it because they love it.
mm,
And there's this camaraderie between people on different teams because they know without each other, they don't get to play this
yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
So I'd see that particularly I saw it in Dublin where they have a field that called uh, Croke Park that gets used by several teams. So I went to a double header, 4 teams played, and in the time between the games, they're all talking to you. They all know each other. So it's just this sense of camaraderie and this sense that they're doing it because they love it for whatever reason. Maybe it's a sense of home for some of the expats, or it's learning something new. I heard a lot of people say that this was gives me a new passion that I didn't think I would have anymore, or all these different reasons for playing or developing friendships or whatever it happened to be, but playing because of the game. There's a certain purity to that.
yeah, yeah. Even with like Manchester baseball and some of its rivals, like with Liverpool being one of its closest clubs, I know what you mean there. Like I've got friends in the Liverpool system,
Yeah.
and you think it's rivalries. When the game's on, it's a full-on rivalry,
Yep.
and afterwards it's let's go get a beer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like you said, and everybody that I seem to have talked to and met within the game just wants the best for the game and wants it to grow. And then once the game's done, it is about the love of the sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you were planning to out your um, book and the journey, how did you decide on which clubs you wanted to visit, and what was your process in getting those things arranged?
The first thing that was difficult was realizing that teams only play games once a week on
Hmm.
Sundays.
Hmm.
Because I'm used to amateur ball, even here, they play a game during the week. So they play
Yeah,
twice a week. Once a week meant the scheduling was going to be difficult. And that also was fortuitous because it meant that I would go to practices or to training. And that was really valuable because that's where I could really talk to people because they had
yeah,
time.
yeah,
It's harder to talk to people at games. I did some, but much more difficult. I started with Ireland. I started with Dublin simply because I know the city, and that was my first contact. So I started with Dublin. I started with the Mariners, and fortuitously there as well. One of their former players lives in Windsor, has played with them. So I had lunch with him. That was sort of my initial in. And then it expanded out. People started to hear about the project. Baseball Ireland heard about the project, and once they got involved, they were able to really connect me with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to go to Cork because that's a new team that came out of the ashes of another team, and I wanted to see that. Then when I started thinking about Scotland, um, I was just drawn to Tayport, honestly, because of where their field is,
Yeah, it's
and
beautiful.
that's something I write about in the book. Um, I was drawn to Aberdeen as well, um, just because of the history there, and then Edinburgh. It made sense to do those three clubs. I knew I wanted to do Wales, and that meant Cardiff because that's all there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then England was the hard part, um, because I didn't know where to go initially.
Mm.
I knew I only had time to go to one club or one city. So the reason I landed on Leicester was because they have the Blue Sox, the men's team, but they also have the Diamonds, the
Yeah.
women's team. And so that's how I landed on Leicester. And then I was also lucky enough that the British Summer Cup was on in the time I was here. So
Yeah.
I was able to go to Farnham Park and to Slough. So that helped balance things out a bit. And I was able to talk to a couple of teams there as well on top of everything else.
Yeah, there's a really nice part in the book, that whole section, because it does take a lot of the work was in 2023,
2023. Yeah.
2023, yeah. And it was just good to read like a list of names and people and teams are in there. I said teams twice. Won't be getting that out. I'll carry on. Um, but yeah, it's just a nice. I've been to Farnham Park once for a cup tournament a few years ago. It was during COVID, so my experience there wasn't as much fun as
Right.
I'd like to have been, but I could vision it backed out. What did you make of your trip to Farnham Park? Because that is like British baseball's Wembley Stadium, I suppose. It's supposed to be the best ground in the country.
Yeah, for sure. It is. I mean, it doesn't even compare to any of the other parks I saw. Um, there are the two fields that are really immaculate.
Hmm.
Um, and they're as good as the facilities around here where I am familiar with, and the parks that they have here. It's uh, it's nice to have that facility with, and they were able to use some of the softball fields for baseball, and to just have so many teams playing over the course of a weekend was
Yeah,
phenomenal. I think there were 5 games going on at a time during that weekend, so it was really great. And unfortunately the weather was terrible, so the one
I
day
thought
got
the weather would
all-
get mentioned a fair
pretty
bit.
much washed out, but in that time when the rain delays were on, all the teams were mixing together and talking, and um, even that was interesting. But the baseball was good. That was, in terms of people ask the quality of ball, that was the best baseball I saw, because I saw a couple of the London teams, saw the London
Yeah,
Nets play Essex in the final, and that those two teams are clearly the best I saw on the trip.
yeah. Speaking of the weather, was there any point within your journey and stay over here that you thought it was going to ruin the whole trip? Because you were over here for 7 weeks, weren't you? And
Yeah.
we know that you were only able to do a few weekends because, like I said, it's not played through midweek. Was there ever any doubts about some of the stuff that was going to happen?
I mean, the weather did play in. A couple training sessions got washed out. Um, that was the unfortunate part about Cardiff, is I didn't get to see a game
Yeah,
because that did get washed out. That was the worst weather of the whole trip, was in Cardiff. Um, and at Farnham Park, the afternoon of the first day got washed out, but they played the rest of the game, so it wasn't too bad. it's like Jason West at Taport said there was scheduling hiccups about something. And he said that's just the reality of British baseball, and
Yeah,
it is. It's just you roll with the punches.
yeah.
And Leicester, for example, the Diamonds game got canceled on the Saturday, but I ended up being able to have an interview with their coach Martin. Um, they all call him Coach Martin. And and then the second day, the Blue Sox were supposed to be playing at home, and that got washed out, and they just rescheduled it to Birmingham.
Mm.
And I get a phone call in first thing in the morning saying, "Well, we moved it. Can you come?" And I looked at the train schedule and was able to get there just in time for first pitch. But it just taught me you just have to be adaptable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you managed to get a really good interview with Holly from RBI Wales as well, even though it was washed out in Wales. So I managed to speak to Holly.
Yeah, yeah, I was really happy to talk to Holly and the people at the Cardiff Club. Several of them told me you have to talk to her, and she was nice enough to sit down with me and have coffee and talk about what they're trying to do with kids and baseball and develop it.
Hmm. Mm. Yeah, she's a very inspirational figure within
Yes.
a lot of baseball. A lot of people I spoke to speak very highly of it. Again, another person I need to get on the podcast. Can't wait to hear some of her stories. But yeah, whoever you speak to about Holly, nothing but great things.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of inspirations, was there anything or anyone that inspired you to write this particular book?
I don't think so. I think it was just curiosity
Mm,
mainly, and then there were so many people who were inspiring as I talked to them over the course of uh, of it all. It's hard to single any one person out. But before going, no, there wasn't really any any one person.
no, that's all right. Was there rephrase that? What do you hope the readers will take away from your book?
I guess that to see that there's more to baseball than Major League Baseball. I mean, I guess that's what I hope North American readers
Mm,
will take is that grassroots baseball is something we should care about,
yeah.
and that's true with readers in the UK and Ireland as well. But there, I guess the difference is with North American audiences, baseball is a big one of the major sports, but it's all focused at the pro level, and I want them to see grassroots baseball is important. In Ireland and the UK, I want people to see that baseball is an important sport and should get more attention than it does. As a kind of niche or minority sport, I hope that one of the things this book can do is help in whatever small way it can to grow the game a little bit.
Yeah. Are there any other sports you're curious about around the world that could lead you on another adventure? Like, are you going to be doing extreme frisbee in Norway, for example?
uh, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm still searching for whatever the next project is, and I don't honestly really know yet.
Hmm. Well, do you think that there could be another baseball book in the future, like exploring places like Holland or Italy, the Czech Republic or Germany? Like they also have a rich history of baseball within their countries, and Germany even has its own pro leagues and stuff.
Yeah, I actually am interested in, especially in baseball in Czechia, um, and I'm fascinated because as you know, they were at the World Baseball Classic
Hmm.
and did quite well, and none of those players are passport holders. They're all native born Czechs. They didn't import anybody in. And so many of the other teams that come to the classic, including Great Britain, they're all passport holders. And so what what really fascinates me about the Czechs is that they've developed players, and they've developed obviously kids playing baseball coming up through, and are able to put together such a good team just based on people who were born there. They're not
Mm.
relying on expats. They're not relying on, you know, people of Czech descent who live in New York.
Yeah, yeah. Their journey was really, really interesting. Man, I interviewed the head coach to try and
Okay.
find out like what the blueprint was to the success. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of passport holders across a lot of teams. I think Czech Republic had two players
Okay.
that maybe I might fact check that, but yeah, it's like I said, it was a majority of homegrown talent, and considering where they came from to where they are now, it's a brilliant tale and a great ride. Make a good film.
Yeah, absolutely would.
Yeah, too
But
right.
yeah, they that interests me. I think the history in the Netherlands is really fascinating
Mm,
of baseball there. So so yeah, I mean, I am intrigued by it. We'll see what happens.
yeah. What was your favorite part of researching this particular book?
It was the trip. I mean, that trip was pretty magical. That 7 weeks of just giving myself over to baseball. I didn't have anything else I had to do. Um, I wasn't teaching. I wasn't working on any other book. I just was thinking about baseball and talking to people about baseball and watching, and so that was it.
Yeah. But what were the most challenging parts of writing this particular, apart from the weather?
I mean, honestly, the scheduling and the figuring that itinerary out for the
Mm,
trip was one of the most challenging things. It was like, how do I fit in everything I need to do and talk to the people I need to get to? That was the hardest part. And then for me with writing projects, I always have to figure out what the organization is going to be, like what the organizing principle is going to be. For this one, that came into place pretty quickly because I realized that the arc of the trip was exactly the arc of the book, and I lucked out because I started in Ireland, and what they're doing with Baseball Ireland, I think laid this really nice template
mm,
for me to be able to think through what was happening at other places along the
yeah.
way.
Well, the project was only supposed to originally 5 weeks, and extend to seven. What would you have done differently if you had more time?
Go to a couple more clubs in England for
Yeah,
sure. Um, Probably somewhere like Brighton, for example.
yeah, yeah. Rich history of
Um,
baseball in Brighton.
Maybe Liverpool.
Mm,
But if I could have say had 10 or 12 weeks, yeah, a couple more places there. Belfast for sure. Um, and probably come into London and spend some time with the Mets.
yeah,
So that it would have been mainly more English baseball, and then maybe coming back to Cardiff and being able to do some of what I wasn't able to do because of weather.
yeah. With all the people that you interviewed within the book, what did you learn from those individuals? What were some of your biggest takeaways?
The thing that kept coming up over and over again is how much you have to want to play the game in order to play,
Mm,
and how much you have to love it to play it. Just because, like you said, to play a game at noon, you have to be there at 9, not because you're warming up, because you're setting the field up.
yeah,
There's so many people said you really have to want it to play this game. And so that level of dedication was 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 there. And also, and this came up in several places too, the fragility of the game. Um, and I think Sean Mitchell in Ireland said that they've been playing, for about 30 years. Baseball's been going in Ireland, and he said the game's still fragile. it could fall apart, and they know that.
Mm.
And that's true in other places too. And as you know, teams full come and go. You have to have these dedicated core of people, at least a couple people at each place to keep a team going. So at the club level, it can be fragile. At the league level, it can be fragile. And as Sean said, at the country level, it can be fragile. So it is important that you have players and coaches and umpires and scorekeepers who are dedicated to doing it and who do love it enough to want to put the time in.
Yeah. Yeah, the people, it's so funny because as many people don't know about it in the UK, the people that are involved are some of the most passionate people about the sport in this country that you'll ever come across. They
Yes.
eat it, sleep it, breathe it, bleed it. It's incredible. The people that are involved in the game are just, oh, it's like I said earlier, it's the reason why I do the podcast, is
Yeah.
to meet these individuals and tell their stories. Such a great group. I'd like to know as well, because with with baseball meaning a lot to a lot of people here, what does baseball mean to you?
It's funny because that's a question I asked almost everybody. And
Mm,
the way I phrased it was, why baseball? And the answer, some people were very eloquent, and often people just said something like, I can't explain it. I can't put my finger on it. And there are times when I feel like that myself. But for me, it's still about a connection to my father who's no longer here. But it's also, I love it as a sport because there's pauses and there's time for thinking.
mm,
And it's also a sport that's, it's very writerly. It's so much time, and stories are so much part of baseball, and they always have been. And it's also a sport, like, I love watching pitching. I love thinking about how a pitcher attacks a hitter and how they mix pitches in, and I like sitting behind home plate and watching the pitches and trying to discern which pitch has been thrown, and
mm.
all those kinds of things. So for me, it's a whole bunch of things. Um, but it's also because it's a sport. There's always something to learn. That whole thing
Yeah,
about
yeah.
you see something different every time you go to the ballpark. So it's a whole bunch of things for me. It really
Mm.
is.
Did you ever play yourself?
I did. I played till I was about 14, and
Mm.
I grew up in rural Alberta in Western Canada, and there, and this is true most places in North America. That's when it starts to get serious, and I wasn't great, and I didn't want to get serious, so I stopped. I've played slow pitch since then, or that's what we call here slow pitch softball.
Yeah.
Um, but I haven't played baseball in a very long time.
There's a lot of really good quotes in the book as well. Like you said then about it being storytelling. In sports, players are the real storytellers. The sports writers are just translating the stories into words. It's just one of them. That's right at the beginning of the book. Um, which is your favorite quote in the book?
Favorite quote. I think my favorite. It's partly quote, partly story. It's Jason West at Tayport. I
I
was
thought you were
staying
going
in
to say.
Dun. I was staying in Dundee, and Jason, I talked to him, and he said, "I'll pick you up and take you to my favorite coffee spot, and we can talk." So he drives in and picks me up at our flat, and we drive back over the Tay River, and we're driving. Tayport's a very small place,
Mm,
very small town, and he drives and he parks, and there was no businesses around. He didn't know what was going on. He opens the back tailgate, gets out a thermos and two folding chairs, and points at the diamond, which I just noticed, which is right beside the North Sea, and says, "This is my favorite spot for coffee." And it was just magical. This little backstop that's right beside the sea. Um, Yeah, I think that's my favorite, maybe not quote, but favorite moment
Mm,
in the whole
yeah.
thing.
I thought it might have something to do with Jason because he's got quite a few in there. I thought the one you were going to go with was about baseball being easy to begin and then spending a lifetime um, tailoring it or something on those lines.
Yeah, Jason was very quotable.
Hmm.
That whole interview. There's a ton of things that Jason said. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I always do remember the quote from Sean Mitchell that I said about baseball being precarious. Like,
Yeah.
that's one that sticks in my head.
Mm. Yeah, I actually had that written down as part of a question because I really liked the way it was structured and the way it was worded, but I couldn't think of a question to ask
Mhm.
that could include that in there. So the only way you're going to find out, folks, is by picking up a copy of the book and having a read, but it'll be well worth it. Now, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball here because you're also involved in another one of my favorite passions as well, and that is comic books. You also teach comic studies. First of all, how cool is that? How did you get involved in like teaching comic studies?
So, of course, like lots of people, I read comics when I was a kid and everything. I didn't read them for a long time after I finished university. And then I had some students, I was teaching a creative writing class, and
Mm,
students started giving me comics. Read this, read this. And I did and thought, oh, this is interesting. It's a lot more, kind of mature in its writing than it used to be, etc. And I started to think, because my training is in literacy and writing studies. So, how do people read and write? That's what have been interested in. And I started to see I can write about comics like that and think about comics in that way. So, I first started writing about how teachers from kindergarten to grade 12 can use comics, and comics are this complex way of reading, and that's what I was writing about initially. And then I started to just teach it, various kinds of courses on comics. I teach a comics history course, and I teach a comics and rhetoric course, and a variety of different things. And I'm lucky enough to be in a department where if I want to teach it, they let me. So,
brilliant.
yeah, and students love those courses, so I'll keep doing them. I have one again in the fall, a comics and rhetoric course, so nonfiction comics, basically.
Ah, sounds a dream. Can I do them online? Does it have
Yeah,
to be classroom based? That's so cool. I did a bit of creative writing not too long ago. I learned well, I started to learn how to do writing kids' books, and
right.
I didn't realize how heavy and intense that was going to be. So can you imagine something like comic books being quite a weighty
Yeah,
subject, don't you?
yeah,
Can you remember any of the comic books that were given to you by your students that were the impetus?
yeah. It was actually some of the Daredevil stuff from the early 2000s. It was actually the Bendis stuff,
Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah.
the Brian Bendis written material, and I think it might have been Alex Maleev doing the art. But it was, I definitely remember it was all the collections of the Bendis stuff that they initially gave me.
Yeah, I do like Brian Michael Bendis. Have you read this, is it called Six Gun by Brian Michael Bendis?
Yes.
Yeah, that was really
Yeah.
cool. I really like that as well. What's your favorite comic books? Mine tends to
There's
flip-flop
so
depending
many.
on
Yeah,
what mood I'm
it's
in.
yeah, I same with me. Yeah, it depends.
Sometimes I'm in a Tom King Batman sort of mood, other times it's Mike Mignola Hellboy, uh Jeff Johns Aquaman, Green Lantern by Jeff Johns as well. Just depending on depending on how I feel.
Yeah, it depends on if I'm reading. I read a lot of memoir comics and things like
Mm,
that. It sort of depends a bit. When you teach comics and write
uh,
about comics, it gets really hard to pin down what your favorite is. Really hard, actually.
I can recommend you a baseball comic. It is Stealing Home.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And it's a lovely one by Paddy Johnson. It's like a
yeah.
diary comic type of thing. and that is
I
a
need
lot
to
of
get a
fun.
copy of that. I know Patty a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that's
have
cool.
taught, talking about baseball comics, I've taught James Sturm's The Golem's Mighty Swing, which is a great baseball comic.
I'm not familiar with that one. I'll have
Yeah,
to
it's
write
very
that one
good.
down and get looked into. So as we sort of wrap up this interview, I really could talk to you about comic books all night, but the people who want to hear baseball stuff, and that was just for me to indulge a bit. What important advice would you give to a first-time author?
I actually had an email last week from somebody who wanted to start writing baseball stuff, and
Hmm,
what I said to him is the first thing I wrote about baseball was an essay. It was an essay about my dad and baseball. I said start with an essay and see where that takes you, and then if you've got something more to say than that, that'll sort of become apparent. I think you have to start small.
yeah, that's interesting. Good stuff. It's custom for the guests to have the final word on the podcast. So, Dr. Dale Jacobs, are there any last words you'd like to give? Any parting advice or any shout outs you'd like to give?
I just like to thank everybody who talked to me for the book, and it's way too many people to name, but I was able to talk to people in a lot of different places, and people were so generous with their time,
Mm,
and I just hope that it's a book, as I said before, that captures what baseball means to people and why it's so important to them, and just really want to get the stories right.
yeah, definitely. I think you've done a bang up job, and I hope that when the readers get hold of it, they'll agree that there's a really good read and well worth the time. I'd also like to thank Gabriel Fiddler as well for hooking us up and setting us this interview. I It's one of those weird things where I don't really go on Facebook anymore unless I'm posting something in the British Baseball Clubhouse for an episode or doing some bits and pieces for Project Cobb. And I just went on it one day, didn't feel any need to go on it, just put it on, and boom, there was his post about the book.
How
And
about the
then
book?
five minutes later, I pre-ordered my copy, and yeah, and I messaged him and said, "Can you sort this out for us?" And here we are.
That's great.
Yeah. When is the book released in the UK? We said it's
Thursday, the 15th of May.
yeah,
The
and
15th of May.
you're on tour in UK as well.
I
When it comes
am.
out, have you got some tour
I ha-
dates?
yeah, I have an event the 17th in Leicester,
Hmm.
and the 24th I'll be in Dundee.
Hmm.
The 29th I'll be in Edinburgh. So those are my UK dates, and then I'm
Yeah.
in Ireland the 31st, and in Cork, and June 5th in Dublin.
So this is your first stop in the UK.
Leicester is the first stop on the
Yeah.
17th.
And what I'll do is I'll get the dates and the locations from you uh, in email, and I'll post them where people can find a link to the
Perfect.
book, where they can order it, and also where you'll be on those dates
Perfect.
as well. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Jacobs. Again, really appreciate it. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine. Take care now.